The air inside my glass sanctuary didn't smell like sandalwood anymore. It smelled like pulverized drywall and cheap Chardonnay. I stood in the entryway, staring at the catastrophe. My younger sister Chloe and her husband Brandon stood amidst a pile of rubble that used to be my living room wall. They held my crystal wine glasses, laughing as if they hadn't just sledgehammered the load-bearing support of my home. "Surprise," Chloe squealed. "We are making it open concept for the vlog." I didn't scream. I just looked at the structural beam hanging by a thread and felt my blood turn to ice. Before I tell you what I did next, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from. Are you Team Sanctuary or Team Open Concept? I need to know who is with me on this. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My brain simply shifted gears from shock to a cold, high-speed processing mode. It was the same fugue state I entered when a database corrupted or a server farm overheated. Assess the damage. Identify the variable. Eliminate the threat. Chloe looked at me, her face flushed, not with shame but with genuine annoyance. "You are back early," she huffed, setting her wine glass down on a side table that was now coated in white dust. "You ruined the reveal, Olivia. We were going to film the reaction video next week." Brandon wiped drywall dust from his beard, gesturing vaguely at the gaping hole in my wall with the sledgehammer he was still holding. "We are improving the flow, Liv." That wall was blocking the natural light. It was terrible for content. Plus, we needed a studio space, and you are never here anyway. From the patio, my in-laws Richard and Karen wandered in. They looked at me with the mild, condescending amusement of parents watching a toddler throw a tantrum. Richard took a sip of what I realized was my vintage scotch. "Now, Olivia, don't be dramatic," he said, his voice thick with unearned authority. "Family property is communal. We are just making better use of the space since you are always off in Tokyo. You should be grateful for the free labor." Grateful, the word hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Grateful that they had broken into my home. Grateful that they had destroyed the structural integrity of my sanctuary. Grateful that they viewed my property as a resource to be mined for their vanity. I stepped over a pile of shattered drywall. My heels clicked against the polished concrete floor, a sharp, rhythmic sound that cut through their laughter. "Get out!" My voice was a flat line. No inflection, no emotion, just a command. Chloe rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, stop being such a buzzkill. It is late and we already moved our stuff into the guest wing. We are not going anywhere tonight. Brandon, pour her a drink so she can calm down." I didn't look at Brandon. I didn't look at the scotch. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't unlock it to check messages. I didn't open a social media app. I swiped up and tapped the emergency dialer. 3 numbers. 911. I held the screen up, the green call button pulsing under my thumb. "You have exactly 60 seconds to remove yourselves from my property," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "If you are still inside my house at the 61-second mark, I am pressing this button. I will report an active break-in by 4 intruders armed with a sledgehammer. And considering you just destroyed a load-bearing wall, I will also be asking the operator to send a building inspector to condemn the property while you are still inside it." The silence that followed was absolute. The smirk slid off Chloe's face. Brandon lowered the sledgehammer. Karen gasped, clutching her pearls in a performance of shock that would have been funny if I wasn't so full of cold rage. "You wouldn't," Richard blustered, though he took a step back. "We are family." 50 seconds, I said. "You are insane," Chloe shrieked. "You are actually kicking us out. We have nowhere to go." 40 seconds. They didn't wait for 30. The realization that I was not bluffing, that I had effectively dehumanized them into trespassing variables in my security algorithm, finally hit. Brandon dropped the hammer with a clang. They scrambled for their bags, grabbing purses and coats, tripping over the rubble they had created. "You are heartless," Chloe screamed from the driveway as they piled into their car. "You are a cold, miserable witch, Olivia." I watched them go. I watched the taillights disappear down the winding driveway. Only when the silence returned, heavy and thick with dust, did I lower my phone. I didn't lock the door. There was no point. The frame was shattered. Instead, I walked to the center of my ruined living room, sat down on my couch, and stared at the jagged hole in my life. The dust settled on my suit, turning everything gray. I wasn't safe here anymore, and that meant I had work to do. I sat in the ruins of my living room for exactly 12 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I simply let the silence wash over me, heavy and contaminated. The air purifiers were already humming, working overtime to scrub the particulate matter from the atmosphere, but I knew it would take days to clear the air. I looked at the jagged edges of the drywall where my sister had taken a sledgehammer to my piece. To anyone else, this was just property damage. A messy renovation gone wrong. But to me, it was a violation of the most fundamental code of my existence. You see, I didn't grow up in a home. I grew up in a landfill. My parents were hoarders. The kind where you have to carve pathways through stacks of 20-year-old newspapers and broken appliances just to reach the bathroom. My childhood smelled like mildew, cat urine, and despair. Chaos was the baseline. Noise was constant. There was no space that was truly mine because every horizontal surface was eventually colonized by my parents' inability to let go of garbage. I spent 18 years suffocating in that clutter. I learned to make myself small to compact my existence into a backpack so I wouldn't add to the mess. I studied data architecture because it was clean, it was logical. It was a world where I could delete the noise and organize the chaos into pristine functioning systems. When I bought this house, I didn't just buy real estate. I bought a fortress of silence. I chose the glass walls not because they were trendy, but because they forced transparency. You cannot hide a pile of junk behind a floor-to-ceiling window. You cannot let secrets fester in a room flooded with light. This house was the physical manifestation of my mind. It was the only place on earth where I could lower my shields because I controlled every variable. Philosophers talk about the sanctuary of the self, the idea that a human being needs a sovereign space to remain whole. For me, that wasn't a metaphor. This structure was my external hard drive. It was where I stored my sanity. By smashing that wall, Chloe hadn't just damaged a building. She had breached the hull of my identity. She had brought the chaos I had spent a lifetime escaping right back into my safe room. I stood up and brushed the dust from my trousers. The initial shock had metabolized into something colder and more useful. Assessment. Calculation. Retribution. I walked to the kitchen island, which was miraculously untouched, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed a familiar beacon of order in the dusty dark. I didn't look at photos of the damage. I opened a spreadsheet. Item 1. Structural assessment. I pulled up the contact for the structural engineer who had done the initial inspection when I bought the place. I drafted an email marking it urgent. Subject line: unauthorized structural modification. Item 2. Security. The locks I had installed were clearly insufficient against the entitlement of family. I needed a digital moat. I navigated to the website of a private security firm that specialized in high net worth protection. I didn't want a loud alarm. I wanted thermal imaging. I wanted remote lockdown capabilities. I wanted facial recognition that would flag my sister as a hostile entity the moment she stepped onto the driveway. Item 3. The cost. I estimated the repairs, the emergency engineering, consult the rush fees for the glass, and the security upgrade. The number in my head was hovering around $150,000. I typed it into the cell. It looked clean. It looked actionable. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a hostile takeover attempt. And I was the CEO of this fortress. I hit send on the emails, closed the laptop, and walked to the guest room to sleep. I didn't lock the door. I knew they wouldn't be back tonight. Fear is a powerful deterrent, but legal consequences are better. And tomorrow, I was going to ensure they had plenty of both. The following morning, I was on a flight back to Tokyo. I didn't want to leave, but the servers weren't going to maintain themselves, and my contract stipulated a physical presence for the quarterly review. I watched the coastline recede from the window seat, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I had secured the perimeter, but I knew the siege was just beginning. My phone buzzed before we even reached cruising altitude. It was a notification from Instagram. Chloe had tagged me in a post. I didn't want to look. I knew it would be poison. But data is data, and you cannot formulate a strategy without knowing the variables. I opened the app. The thumbnail was a tear-stained selfie of Chloe, looking tragically beautiful in the backseat of her car. The caption read, "Homeless. My own sister kicked us out on the street in the middle of the night. We were just trying to help fix up her place while she was gone, and she called the cops on us. I don't know where we're going to sleep tonight. Family really shows their true colors when you need them most." Broken heart emoji. I scrolled through the comments. They were a deluge of misplaced sympathy. "Oh my God, that's awful. Your sister sounds like a monster. Karma will get her, babe." Then came the texts. My phone began to vibrate incessantly as the flying monkeys descended. Aunt Linda, Olivia, I saw Chloe's post. How could you be so cruel? She's your baby sister. Cousin Mike, dude, kicking them out at night. That's cold, even for you. Mom, via a new number, since I'd blocked the old one. You have always been selfish, but this is a new low. Apologize to your sister and let them back in, or don't bother coming home for Christmas. I sat there at 30,000 feet, feeling the familiar sting of the narcissistic injury dynamic. Psychologists talk about how narcissists don't feel guilt when they hurt you. They feel insulted that you dared to protect yourself. Chloe wasn't ashamed that she had destroyed my property. She was offended that I had established a boundary. In her mind, she was the victim because I had refused to be her resource. My autonomy was an attack on her ego. The injustice of it burned. I wanted to reply to every comment. I wanted to post the photos of the sledgehammered wall and the structural engineering report I had received that morning, which detailed the $180,000 in damages. I wanted to scream that I wasn't the villain. I was the one paying for everything. But I didn't. Engagement is fuel for a narcissist. Any reaction I gave would just be content for her next vlog. My sister is harassing me now. Look how mean she is. The only way to win was to starve the fire. I put my phone on airplane mode, not just for the flight, but for my sanity. I opened my work laptop and buried myself in code. Logic, structure, syntax. These were things I could control. But even as I typed, a cold dread settled over me. They weren't going to stop. The post was just the opening salvo. They were rallying the troops, painting a narrative where I was the rich, heartless oppressor, and they were the scrappy, misunderstood underdogs. By the time I landed in Tokyo, I felt heavy. The jet lag mixed with the emotional weight of being the family scapegoat. I checked into my hotel, sterile, clean, impersonal, and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence here wasn't the peaceful silence of my glass fortress. It was the lonely silence of exile. Maybe I was being too harsh. The thought crept in, insidious and familiar. It was the voice of my conditioning, the decades of being told that my needs were secondary to the family's chaos. Maybe I should just pay for the repairs and let them stay in the guest house. Maybe I could install a lock on the main wing and just manage them. I closed my eyes and played the tape forward. I used a technique I used in risk assessment. The counterfactual. What happens if I don't enforce the boundary? I saw it clearly. Chloe and Brandon moving in temporarily. The temporary becoming 6 months. The guest wing expanding into the main house. The noise. The mess. The constant requests for money disguised as loans. The gradual erosion of my sanctuary until it was just another landfill like the one I grew up in. I saw myself at 40 trapped in my own home, hiding in the master bedroom while they threw parties in my living room, paying their bills to avoid a fight, my peace utterly consumed. That vision terrified me more than being called selfish. It terrified me more than being alone. I opened my eyes. The hotel room was dark. The city lights of Tokyo blinked outside, indifferent and beautiful. I wasn't going to be the fuel for their dysfunction anymore. I picked up my phone. I didn't reply to the texts. I didn't comment on the post. Instead, I opened the app for the new security system I had installed. Perimeter secure. Then I opened my email and drafted a message to Mr. Peterson, my lawyer. Proceed with the cease and desist. And prepare the civil suit for damages. We are not negotiating. I hit send. It felt like closing a blast door. I was safe inside my logic. Let them scream at the walls. I wasn't coming out. The notification came at 2:14 in the morning Tokyo time. It wasn't the soft chime of an email or the buzz of a text. It was a harsh rhythmic ping that bypassed my phone's do not disturb setting. A breach protocol. I sat up in the hotel bed, the sheets cold against my skin. My heart rate spiked, not with panic but with the adrenaline of a system under attack. I grabbed the phone. The screen was glowing red. Perimeter breach. Zone 1. Driveway. I tapped the notification, and the live feed loaded instantly. The high-definition thermal camera turned the night into a landscape of cool blues and hot oranges. There were 2 heat signatures standing at the base of my driveway. Even in the ghostly monochrome of thermal imaging, I recognized the slouch of Brandon's shoulders and the frantic, jerky movements of my sister. They were back. I switched to the standard night vision camera for a clearer look. Chloe was wearing a dark hoodie, looking over her shoulder. Brandon was holding something long and heavy. A sledgehammer. I watched, feeling a strange detachment as they approached the front of the house. They weren't sneaking. They were marching. They stopped in front of the new reinforced glass door. I had paid $15,000 to have installed just 48 hours ago. Through the high-gain microphone their whispers came through my phone speaker, tinny but audible. "She changed the codes," Chloe hissed. "I told you she would." "Doesn't matter," Brandon grunted, shifting the weight of the hammer. "We get inside, we change the locks back. By the time she gets back from Japan, we'll have squatters' rights. She can't kick us out if we establish residency." "Just do it," Chloe said. "Break the glass." "It's just glass." "It's just glass." That phrase echoed in the quiet Tokyo hotel room. To them, my sanctuary was nothing more than an obstacle to be shattered. They were going to break in, occupy my home, and dare me to remove them. My thumb hovered over the panic button on the app interface. A red circle with a white bell icon. For a split second, I hesitated. This was the nuclear option. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was criminal trespassing with intent. If I pressed this, men with guns would show up. My sister would be put in handcuffs. The fallout would be catastrophic. The entire family would brand me a monster. But then the counterfactual logic kicked in again, sharp and undeniable. I looked at the screen. I saw the future where I didn't press the button. I saw them inside my house, sleeping in my bed, drinking my wine, filling my clean, silent rooms with their noise and entitlement. I saw myself returning to a home I no longer owned, begging them to leave, paying them off, trapped in a cycle of extortion forever. That future was unacceptable. "I am not your resource," I whispered to the empty hotel room. I pressed the button. On the screen, nothing happened immediately. It was a silent alarm. But thousands of miles away, a signal was racing through fiber optic cables to a private security dispatch center, which was simultaneously patching a priority call to the local police and crucially alerting the city building inspector I had flagged regarding an illegal demolition in progress. I watched Brandon swing the hammer back. He struck the glass. It didn't shatter like in the movies. It spiderwebbed, holding its shape thanks to the laminate interlayer. "Harder," Chloe urged him. I sat in the dark watching the feed, waiting for the blue lights to sweep across the lawn. I wasn't a sister anymore. I was the operator of a fortress, and the siege was about to end. The flight back felt like the longest commute of my life. I watched the Pacific Ocean crawl by beneath the wing, my mind replaying the footage I had already sent to Mr. Peterson. The sledgehammer hitting the glass, the arrival of the police. The look of utter confusion on Brandon's face when the second car pulled up, not a squad car but a white city vehicle with orange flashing lights. When my taxi finally pulled up to the house, the scene was worse than the live feed had shown. There was yellow tape across my driveway. A bright orange sticker was plastered to my front door. "Unsafe structure, do not enter." I stood in the driveway, staring at the condemnation notice. The air didn't smell like drywall anymore. It smelled like ozone and impending rain. My phone rang. It was Mr. Peterson. "Olivia," his voice was crisp, professional. "I have the preliminary report from the inspector. It's worse than we thought." "How bad?" I asked, walking closer to the orange sticker. When Brandon hit the glass, he didn't just crack the pane. He lost his balance and swung the sledgehammer into the support column to the left of the door. The one they had already weakened by removing the shear wall. I closed my eyes. The roof. It sagged 3 inches in the northwest corner. The entire load has shifted. The house isn't just damaged, Olivia. It's structurally compromised. The inspector has red-tagged it. It's uninhabitable until major shoring is done. I looked up at the sleek, sharp lines of my home. It looked broken, tilted. My glass fortress was cracking under the weight of their chaos. "And Chloe and Brandon?" I asked. "They're in custody," Peterson said. "And here is where it gets interesting. Because the damage exceeds $100,000 and involves structural endangerment, the DA isn't looking at this as simple vandalism. They're charging them with felony criminal mischief and reckless endangerment. Brandon is also facing charges for performing unlicensed demolition on a residential structure." "Felonies," I whispered. "Yes. Class B felonies. They're looking at potential prison time, Olivia. Minimum 1 year up to 5. And the fines. Well, the fines are just the beginning. The civil liability for the repairs is currently estimated at $180,000. I hung up and walked to the edge of the property line. I couldn't go inside. My sanctuary was a crime scene. My phone buzzed again. A text from Chloe sent from a burner phone likely smuggled or borrowed at the station. "Liv, please. They're talking about prison. It was an accident. We just wanted to fix the door. You have to drop the charges. Mom is having a panic attack. We're family. I looked at the text. For the first time in days, the cold anger shifted. It didn't melt, it crystallized into something harder. Diamond hard. Mr. Peterson, I said, calling him back. Set up a meeting. Tomorrow morning, I want them there. I want their lawyer there, and I want the in-laws there. What's the play? Peterson asked. I'm going to make them an offer, I said, turning my back on the ruin. But it's going to cost them more than money. The conference room at Mr. Peterson's firm was designed for intimidation. Mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and air conditioning set to a temperature that kept you awake. I sat at the head of the table, flanked by Peterson and a junior associate who was furiously taking notes. On the other side sat the wreckage of my family. Chloe looked small. She wasn't wearing her usual influencer uniform of athleisure and heavy contour. She was wearing a baggy sweatshirt, her face devoid of makeup, eyes red-rimmed and terrified. Brandon sat next to her, staring at his hands, his knuckles white. Richard and Karen were there too, huddled together like shipwreck survivors, their entitlement washed away by the tsunami of legal reality. Their lawyer, a court-appointed public defender who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, cleared his throat. Miss Vance, he began, addressing me. My clients are prepared to plead guilty to misdemeanor trespassing if the felony charges are dropped. They are also willing to discuss a payment plan for the damages. Mr. Peterson didn't even look up from his file. The damages are currently estimated at $180,000, counsel. A payment plan on your client's income would take approximately 40 years to satisfy the principal alone. And that's assuming the DA is willing to reduce the charges, which, given the reckless endangerment of structural collapse, is unlikely. Chloe let out a small, strangled sob. I can't go to prison, she whispered. I'm pregnant. The room went silent. I looked at her. I scanned her face for the telltale signs of a lie, the flicker of manipulation I knew so well. But there was nothing but raw animal fear. She found out yesterday, Brandon muttered finally, looking up. His eyes were hollow. Please, Olivia, we messed up. We know we messed up, but don't let our kid be born in jail. I felt a twinge in my chest. A reflex. The old instinct to fix, to save, to sacrifice myself to keep the peace. It would be so easy to say, okay, to drop the charges, pay for the repairs myself, let them go with a warning. It would be the sisterly thing to do. But then I looked at the photos of my house on the table. The shattered glass. The sagging roof. The physical manifestation of their disregard for my existence. If I saved them now, what lesson would they learn? That there are no consequences, that I am an infinite resource, that they can destroy my life, and I will thank them for the opportunity to clean up the mess. I took a deep breath. The air in the room was cold, clean, and logical. I have a counteroffer, I said. My voice was steady. It didn't tremble. I will petition the DA to drop the criminal charges. I will ask them to suspend the sentences for the remaining misdemeanors, meaning no jail time. Chloe's head snapped up, hope flooding her face. Oh my God, thank you, Liv. I'm not finished, I cut her off. I slid a thick document across the mahogany table. It hit the wood with a heavy thud. This is a settlement agreement. You will sign it today. It stipulates the following. First, you accept full financial liability for the repairs. Since you cannot pay a lump sum, your wages will be garnished by 20% until the debt is paid in full. This is non-negotiable and binding regardless of bankruptcy. Brandon winced but nodded. Second, I continued, you will issue a public retraction of your social media posts admitting to the unauthorized demolition and apologizing for the defamation of my character. You will leave it up for 30 days, then delete your accounts. Delete my accounts, Chloe gasped. But that's the price, I said coldly. But here is the most important part. Clause 3. I pointed to the paragraph at the bottom of the page. This is a permanent lifetime restraining order. It applies to all of you. Chloe, Brandon, Richard, Karen. You will not contact me. You will not come within 500 feet of my property or my person. You will not call, text, email, or send messages through third parties. If you violate this order, if you so much as send me a Christmas card, the suspended sentences will be reactivated and I will press for the maximum penalty on the civil judgment. I leaned forward, locking eyes with my sister. You want to be a family, fine. Be a family, but you will never be my family again. You lost that privilege when you picked up that sledgehammer. This is absolute severance. Sign it and you walk free. Don't, and I let the DA do his job. Chloe looked at the paper. She looked at Brandon. She looked at her in-laws who were staring at the floor in shame. Then she looked at me. "You really hate us that much," she whispered. "I don't hate you," I said. "I just value myself more." With a shaking hand, she picked up the pen. The scratching sound of the signature was loud in the quiet room. One by one, they signed. They signed away their right to my time, my money, and my life. When it was done, Mr. Peterson collected the documents. "Thank you. You are free to go." They stood up. They didn't look back. They shuffled out of the room, a defeated, broken unit. I watched the door close behind them. I sat there for a long time. I thought I would feel sad. I thought I would feel a sense of loss. But as I looked out the window at the city skyline, I realized the heavy weight in my chest was gone. The tether was cut. I was drifting, but for the first time I was steering the ship. "Are you okay?" Mr. Peterson asked gently. I took a sip of water. It tasted clear and cold. "Yes," I said. "I believe I am." 6 months later, the air in my living room smelled of sage and rain. I sat in my favorite armchair, a book open on my lap, but I wasn't reading. I was listening. I was listening to the silence. It was a different kind of silence than the one I had known before. That old silence had been defensive, a barrier erected against the chaos of my upbringing. This new silence was expansive. It was the silence of a cathedral after the doors are locked for the night. It was safe. The house was fully restored. The glass was new, stronger than before. The wall between the kitchen and living room was solid again, reinforced with steel and soundproofing. I had even added a Japanese rock garden in the courtyard, a place of deliberate, unshakable order. My phone buzzed on the side table. I picked it up. A notification from Facebook Memories from 1 year ago. I tapped it. It was a photo of me, Chloe, and our parents at a Christmas dinner. We were all smiling, but my smile looked tight, strained. I remembered that night. Chloe had spent the entire meal complaining about her engagement ring, while I quietly cleaned up the kitchen. I deleted the notification. I didn't have a family group chat anymore. I didn't have to dread the holidays. I didn't have to field panic attacks disguised as phone calls. My life had contracted, yes, but in that contraction it had become dense with meaning. I had lost my sister. I had lost my in-laws. I had lost the illusion that blood was thicker than water. But in exchange I had gained my dignity. I had regained the reins of my own life. I had learned in the most visceral way possible that boundaries are not just lines in the sand. They are the walls of the self, and sometimes to protect the sanctuary within you have to be willing to close the gates forever. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights of Tokyo were far away now. Here in my glass fortress, the only light was the moon, reflecting off the ocean. Was what I did cruel? Was I selfish? I looked at my reflection in the glass. I saw a woman who was whole. "No," I whispered to the night. I was necessary. I turned off the light and walked into the darkness unafraid. If you've ever had to build a fortress to protect your peace, share this story. You are not alone.